Welcome to Redefining Readiness, Smarter Support for the Force. In this podcast, we dive into how health, performance, and data come together to strengthen mission readiness for military service members and their families. Today, we're joined by three leaders from Leidos who are driving innovation in how readiness is measured, supported, and sustained through smarter technologies, integrated care, and solutions that put outcomes first. Liz Porter is president of the Leidos Health and Civil Sector, where she leads nearly 13,000 employees, delivering mission-critical solutions that enhance health, safety, and readiness across military and civilian populations. Under her leadership, the sector serves as a leading provider of advanced technologies and services across the healthcare ecosystem. Thad Allen is a senior advisor at Leidos and a retired U.S. Air Force officer with over 30 years of service, including 6 combat deployments and leadership roles ranging from squadron commander to the director of the Preservation of the Force and Family Program at U.S. Special Operations Command. His work has advanced the holistic well-being of more than 73,000 Special Operations Forces members and their families. And Dr. Keita Franklin is Chief Behavioral Officer at Leidos and a nationally recognized expert in military mental health and suicide prevention. She previously held senior leadership roles at the Department of Defense and the Department of Veterans Affairs, where she led behavioral health strategies that supported millions of service members and veterans. Today, Keita will be serving as our moderator. So with that, Keita, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. I couldn't be more excited to be here today with Liz and Thad. And I just want to jump right in, if that's okay. So I have a first question I want to ask you, Liz. And just getting right out of the gate to the heart of the issue here today, I'm wondering if you could share more about the health outcomes that we prioritize, specifically how these investments enhance the overall readiness of service members and their families.
Thank you, Keita. Certainly we take kind of a long-term view, that holistic view of readiness. It's one that includes not just the service member, but their entire family. So when we think about it, because we understand the context that they operate in, we can interpret health and performance data in ways that truly matter to mission outcomes. Readiness is shaped not just by physical, but by physical, behavioral, and relational factors. So for example, we're using sleep data in operational settings to catch early signs of fatigue, preventing mishaps before they happen. But it really isn't just about tracking data, it's about acting on it. And I think that's really where we're trying to rethink of how we deliver our support. Traditional staff augmentation models, they don't always provide enough. And so we're shifting more to performance-based contracts and thinking about metrics like retention or how do you utilize a provider and thinking about how can we create shared accountability to drive a better outcome. And the result isn't just enhancing readiness, it does streamline the workflow and it accelerates really that delivery of care.
I so appreciate you sharing so much about that because over the years, there's been such an emphasis on physical. So to hear you talk about sleep and relational, it's just music to my ears. You have no idea. So
it all works together, right?
Yes, it all comes together. And I think that's a good segue over to you, Thad. Just based on your real world, boots on the ground experience in the SOF arena, I'm wondering if you would be able to share more about how does this play out, like in a real world operational sort of environment?
Sure. I couldn't agree more that readiness is shaped by far more than just physical attributes. That's the easiest, most visible thing to see. But we're seeing that cognitive performance, behavioral well-being, and also healthy relationships, along with a member's social connectedness, all play a role in how service members perform and recover. And these things contribute to the member's resiliency and, for that matter, family resiliency. Our experience shows us that a member's social connectedness is actually the number one indicator of their overall resiliency.
And that's also such an interesting point as well, because we see that in the literature. Social connection is the biggest protective factor for a host of other things. So it makes intuitive sense too.
And Keita, I love the tie into the family, right? The resilience of not just the service member, but the family.
Yes, I wanted to ask you more about that. Like, what have you seen firsthand? I know you're a military spouse. I can appreciate that myself, growing up as a military family and a spouse too. But what do you see as some of the real strengths that tie back to this long-term readiness overlaid by the family component?
I think what's important is the fact that we are talking about inclusiveness of looking at the family and in even extending that out to some cases where it's a caregiver that isn't necessarily a family member, because the stress that's on the family is really distracting from the service member's ability to be ready. You can't have a service member out deployed and be thinking about, is a child acting up at home, or are there financial issues at home that the
Mhm.
spouse is dealing with? And so I think ensuring that we're thinking about it holistically, not just from holistic health, but holistic from the family and the extended family, I think that's going to be really key to the outcomes.
It's a good point. And caregiver. We need to talk more about the caregiver side, don't we? We sometimes will say family, but we need to recognize the full continuum.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, this is such a good point. I know that you've done work with in the context of embedded programming, embedded provider work. Did you have anything else you would share about that?
Certainly, I think in the cases where we're able to embed individuals that are working with the service members, I think it's really important that, I think about, we have teams of non-medical counselors, and they are often co-located with the service members or their family members, and they're able to spot signs of stress. Sometimes it's even before the service member realizes it. Think about somebody that sees you on a daily basis and knows when you're not quite right and knows to ask, hey, is everything okay today? And being able to identify that. And certainly family challenges and relationship stress, they really show up in some of that conversation that they're having with these embedded personnel. And so those providers are kind of like an early warning system. They're able to bring that trend even without maybe sharing information that the individual feels is a little bit more personal, but being able to share that trend with leadership so they can see where there may be an issue brewing. And that really helps the commander to act quickly. And it's beyond just the data.
I appreciate you for sharing that. I had to ask only because it was revolutionary for its time in the day when the DoD first embedded providers. It was a big, neat new thing that they started to see positive outcomes. Fast forward so many years, it's still a solid capability and a solid way to tie back to the outcomes that you mentioned. So I had to ask.
Yeah.
I appreciate you for sharing. But Dad, what else would you say about the family side of it based on your work? What stands out in supporting families over time in the special operations community specifically?
Sure. I mean, anybody who's been in the military, in the service for a long period of time, recognize that we as service members can't do what we do without the support network that we have. And the family, I like to say, the family is the foundation upon which we build. And so, service members often come in without a family, and then during their time, they gain a family, they gain children, and so forth. And so, recruiting an individual but retaining the family really seems to play out. And as a note, we like to say when we embed these resources there, they become trusted agents, not just to the service members, but to the family, because in the soft community, trust is one of the key things. And it's really common sense. Why would you not embed resources where they're needed most, which is where the people are?
And this recruit a service member, retain the family. That slogan, that saying has been around forever, and it still holds true today. Like it's just as important today as it was when someone coined it years and years ago. Is it not?
Absolutely. My own experience echoes this, and a lot of service members will say, there are service members who have to basically make a decision. Am I going to, am I going to stay in and continue to stress my family, or am I going to, make a decision for the good of the family and go ahead and separate or retire? And that's something that we want to avoid. We want to give every service member the best opportunity to continue to serve, and that family's key to that.
I'm so glad that the ecosystem recognizes that the connection, and the research bears that out as well. So it's so important. I want to talk with both of you about technology and innovation. I know both of you have a keen interest in this topic from a continuum of care perspective. When we think about what's needed and what we need to do to be proactive, I'm wondering if we can start with you, Thad, if we can talk about how technology can be used in this ecosystem to better meet the needs of the special operations community.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So my experience is that we've moved from a reactive model to one that's more proactive and even prescriptive. And so, with the right data, we can anticipate challenges before they impact the mission and then tailor the interventions across all of those domains, as we talked about physical, psychological, social, cognitive, and then spiritual piece also, which we haven't necessarily addressed. But AI powered analytics are helping us do just that, from personalizing our training, predicting injury and increased risk of injury, to accelerating recovery, which is very important. So, one area with real potential is workforce planning. So, by analyzing trends and leveraging AI, we can forecast staffing needs, spot potential gaps, and then adjust before these gaps or needs impact readiness. But having said that, I mean, technology is important, but it's not just about the technology. Turning that right data into insights people can use. The real value comes when a service member is armed with data informed insights that leads to them making a sustained change in their own behavior, right? So if I change my behavior, that drives my buy-in and then buy-in of the team and potentially a cultural change across the units. And as Liz mentioned, we see that with sleep. Sleep, the special operations community is known for having to go long durations and operate sustained periods of time. And so we train to do that. However, because of these approaches to sleep, rest, and recovery, sleep has become a valued contributor to your performance and to your readiness. So if your sleep is impacting your ability to perform, you're impacting your teammates' ability to accomplish the mission. So um, there's other areas such as nutrition and other healthy living lifestyles that are also becoming a cultural norm that you have to take responsibility for yourself as a professional and bring your highest level of performance and readiness at all times. So that's where we see the most value is empowering the service members with tools to improve their performance, and then giving leaders the ability to refine programs and direct resources where they're needed most.
You bring up so many good points, though, because service members, they're consuming so much data every day already on their own wearables, through their own use of AI and the like. And so equipping them to do it in a way that's focused on their readiness, it feels intuitive to me. Like it feels like a natural progression of what they're already doing. So you bring up so many good points. I want to get your perspective on this as well, Liz. Do you have additional thoughts about what innovations or even partnerships could be brought to the table to carry this momentum forward, like not only in 2025, but like well into the next few years for this community?
Certainly. And, Thad, talking about the environment that you work in, it's like when I step back and I think about readiness going forward, it's what's really going to be important. There will be a lot of innovations in this area, is that they need to be solutions that are built for the environment that these operators are operating in. And mention wearables. Thinking about wearables as an example, there's a lot of promise there. There's a lot of data and a lot of information, but you have to think about it from the mission context perspective. And that really does mean working with partners who can understand the demands that are in the field. What are the conditions going to be like? The importance of data security. It's incredibly important that we think about the missions that some of these operators are working in are areas where they don't want people to know that they are. So that data security is critical, and that those tools will really be used to enhance decision making, but we don't want to add to the burden. You don't want it to, Thad mentioned data, they got a lot of data, but they need to be able to make it simplistic. And if we can get that balance right, when you have the right technology integrated in a way that's secure and it's usable and it's aligned to the mission, that's a true enabler for really driving these better outcomes. And that's going to be incredibly important as we look at kind of who we partner with and how we partner moving forward.
Tell us that sweet spot again. Okay, so the balance between the cultural nuance,
Yeah,
like built for the environment.
right.
Tell us
Built
that
for the
again.
environment, thinking about security, thinking about usability, and that really understanding what the mission goal is, so that the data and or the output, whatever information is gathered, really helps to enable that outcome. So that it's not just I'm gathering a bunch of information around the individual. I know what their sleep patterns are, I know what their heart rate is. That's all great, but what is the mission context that it's in, and how am I ensuring that that's securely gathered so that an adversary doesn't get that information, but the right people get the information so they can act on it.
So important. We don't want to overwhelm them with all sorts of data, and we don't want to do it in a way that's putting them at risk.
Yeah.
There's all of these special nuances that must be tended to. You bring up so many good points. As we're getting ready to close, I want to see if either of you have any final thoughts. Let me start with you, Thad. Do you have final thoughts about this conversation in general? That a question that maybe I haven't asked you. Do you have something you would share?
Sure. Just from my own experience and then observing different
Yes.
programs across the service and within the U.S. Special Operations Command, what we've learned is that the resources that are provided, that are embedded, they have to have reach across the unit's deployment cycle, across their redeployment cycle, across their training cycle. So in the soft community, that's called their soft 4 gen cycle. And it specifically has to have a structured recovery after the deployment. And it has to be a formal part of the readiness equation. And this isn't just downtime. This is like a full reset of the human. Okay, come back. It's essential maintenance on your people, and then that has to be tailored to each member's career stage, their exposure history, and the cumulative workload on that individual over potentially decades. Culture plays a huge role in the soft community, and you have to be very conscious of that, and you want to meet people where they are and support them as a system of systems, right? And that includes physical health, mental resilience, social and family fitness, and spiritual strength throughout the entire phase of their operational life cycle. Okay, this can contribute to longitudinal performance, and it can extend the service life.
Mhm.
We take care of our weapon systems with exquisite maintenance system to take care of our people. They need a maintenance system that sustains them and can potentially extend their service lives, because that's a big part of the value proposition. People are our most important asset. And so you spend a lot of time developing them and training them and bringing them to the peak of their performance. You want to sustain them for their life cycle and potentially extend that life cycle, because that's a smart investment.
You bring up so many good points, and I absolutely love the meet people where they are phenomenon. So important and sometimes overlooked from entities. So, and I know we do that every day in our work together. So I greatly appreciate that. But Liz, in terms of final thoughts, I also want to just ask you about the interconnectedness of readiness in general. We've had a critical conversation today about all the components. It is complex, it's interconnected, it's multi-layered. And I'm wondering what final thoughts you might have for the listeners about that concept.
Well, and even just pulling on the thread that Thad had, it's when I think about some of the things that we're doing, we are certainly making meaningful strides in how we deliver care. So thinking about meeting, the individual where they're at, but so expanding that access and reach and the quality. So thinking about, you asked, earlier about technology and innovation, thinking about how we use the technology, thinking about as, related to behavioral health and virtual behavioral health in this day and age right now, certainly really important that we're thinking about how we reduce cost, but you want to reduce cost with greater effectiveness and speed, right? So you want to be able to get the care to the individual and the support to the individual where they're at as quickly as you can or when they need it. And so it is about meeting them where they're at and thinking about that model, that support model to help them that's sustainable. And so when I think about some of the things we're doing, it's bringing together not just the readiness metrics that Thad talked about, but some of those non-medical insights and some technology that really does help with kind of the cost effective and scalable solution, back to talking about mission, that's aligned to mission, especially for communities like the soft community, where they really do have some specific unique needs in the way that they're looking at their personnel and the way they're looking at the greater family, thinking about that it's fine tuned for them. But ultimately, that success is going to depend a little bit on leadership. And, when you have the leaders and the leadership that's empowered to figure out how to assess that, think about refining those readiness initiatives, and then not just managing them, you can see this much stronger alignment. And then you can see continuous improvement, and that does lead to this lasting impact. So, to hit on what Thad was talking about, it's like, how can you make these individuals more effective and efficient? But it has to be aligned to the mission, and it has to be done in a way where they're constantly thinking about how do we evolve. And I think we're starting to, we're looking at solutions that would assist with that.
Such a good way to kind of wrap up our conversation today, because it really does highlight where we need to go in the future when it comes to the special operations community, and making sure that we pay attention to all the nuances that both of you mentioned today. And so I thank you for this conversation, so thoughtful. And I, one thing I know for sure is that readiness, it's not going to happen by accident, super purposeful. And it's definitely, like you said, Liz, going to take leadership, going to take alignment, going to take even courage to evolve at a time when we're looking at cost savings and effectiveness and technology coming our way as fast as it is. I just say I'm thankful to both of you, and I hope we get to continue to do this good work together. So awesome.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Keita.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
This concludes today's episode of the Fed to Fed podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback helps us continue bringing you thought-provoking conversations with the brightest minds in government technology. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we will continue to explore opportunities to harness the power of technology and explore what's next in developing a more innovative and efficient government. Until then, this is the Fed to Fed podcast by GovTech Connects. Thank you for joining us.